Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Midweek Rewind. How you doing, Brent?
I'm
You got
getting Purelled up, man.
way to go, way to go. So, thank you for joining us. For those of you who are watching, or some of you might be watching or listening later, we're glad to have you as well. Once again, we're doing something slightly different today from what we've done in the past couple weeks. This coronavirus thing, Brent, is just crazy, and I might get back to this later, but you and I talked briefly about it last week on the last Midweek Rewind. But I would say even in the past 24 hours, life is just different now than it was yesterday.
And it's an interesting thing that we naturally respond to pressured communication. I mean, stuff that's just thrown in our face.
Yeah.
And I'm not debating the rightness or wrongness of the March Madness adjustment of banning all flights from Europe of, it's NBA season is suspended, but it's very interesting what we take our cues from, what can consume us. Very interesting.
It is. And to me, it's just crazy how quickly things can change. Like, yes, the thing with President Trump and then the NBA and some of the NCAA stuff and then Tom Hanks, all of that happened in like 2 hours.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what a little bit of time, it seems like everything can change.
Yeah.
And you and I are talking really it seems like this is one of those moments that we'll remember this in 20 or 30 years, what it was like when this started to spread.
I lived through the coronavirus pandemic.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And again, you and I talking about, we want to kind of choose our tone carefully. We don't want to belittle people who are fearful. We don't want to belittle people who are, we don't want to belittle it and make jokes that are inappropriate because it is a big deal. And so we're trying to kind of choose our tone carefully as we talk about it now. I'm sure we'll talk about it on Sunday. Who knows what will happen in a few more days, what the world will look like.
So. I was just in, for Multiply, our mission board meetings up in northern Washington. So I flew into Seattle earlier this week, and the governor, if he hasn't already, he's deliberating whether or not to, I don't know if he has the authority, like to ban all gatherings, sporting, church of 250 people or more.
Yep.
It's just very, very interesting.
It's crazy. Yeah. And so real quickly, I know, so sometime today, we're recording on Thursday, we're going to First MB is going to send out an email with what we're currently doing, our plans, anything that might be changing. Do you want to give us a quick rundown? I know you've been in meetings and you've been talking about, we're supposed to take communion this Sunday. So are we still passing out food to everyone on Sunday? So why don't you give us a quick rundown of what we're doing? You'll get an email with all the details, but since we're here, why don't you give us the latest news?
It is important that our faith be relevant to our world. I preach every Sunday believing that the Bible is still relevant. And as a church, we can't just hide our heads in the sand and not deal with the reality. All of us all week long are facing this. And so people are saying, what's the church going to do? Mm-hmm. So yes, we will be sending out an email to the church this afternoon. The primary responsibility that I have as shepherd of the flock, so to speak, is to guide us. And I can guide us spiritually, and then there's some guidance perhaps medically.
Yep.
And on the spiritual one, I hope that people hear this. Our number one concern is that we be able to answer the question well. How does Jesus want me as his follower to live in this reality? It's not get sick, or should I wash my hands or not touch my face, or keep this as my new best friend. That's not our primary concern. This world is not our home. And so that's a hard message, especially for those who are wired to have a lot of concern. But the first thing is, what does it mean to live by faith? In Psalm 112, it says, surely the righteous will never be shaken. they will have no fear of bad news. Whoa.
Yeah.
Why? Because God is with us. He is for us. He has a plan. His plan is good. So that's easy to say. It's hard to do. But again and again, I want our church to say, what do we do with Corona? Well, be faith-filled.
Yeah.
We should be driven by faith, not by fear. We have the long view. The worst thing that can happen is you who are under 40 and has a 0.2% chance of dying if you get coronavirus. The worst thing that can happen is Matt dies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. The point is we live with the long view. So that's the first thing is I'm just going to be pushing people to live by faith. But there are reasonable steps we can take. And in Nehemiah, they were rebuilding the temple, the city walls, and the neighboring nations were threatening to attack. And it was very interesting. They prayed to God and picked up a sword. Very interesting. The first thing,
you need both.
Prayed to God. Second thing, picked up a sword. First thing, coronavirus, that's the neighboring nation. We pray to God. How do I live by faith? God is for us. It's going to be okay. We take reasonable cautions. And so there are a number of cautions that we're going to take. Our greeters, for instance, at the doors, will be encouraged to smile extra big and not shake hands. Because for some people, that is a big deal. And understandably, we are choosing to still pass the offering and pass the communion, but we're going to do communion in a way that minimizes the touch contact with, for instance, the bread. We're going to, at the coffee place, a coffee station, coffee bar, we're going to be sanitizing throughout the morning the pump handle that people touch. The kids ministry is really, really ramping things up in the registration process and keeping those screens clean and sanitizing the toys, which they do every week already. But it is important that we pray to God and pick up our sword. We trust God and we take these reasonable measures. So it'll be interesting.
It'll be very interesting.
Matt, what should we do if our governor says no public meetings with more than 250 people?
It's a great question. And it's unfair because we've already talked about this. So I already know what your answer is.
What the right answer is?
What the right answer is. But I mean, there are Bible verses that say obey your governing authorities. And so, and again, I'm stealing your language because heaven forbid, we meet, we disobey the governor, we meet, and one person comes with the virus, and first minute I'd brother in church is responsible for an outbreak. Of course, we don't want that. So the good news is we are equipped to do things like this. We can still have church whether we're here or you and I are in your living room or whatever. So that was your answer, if I'm quoting you correctly. And I think that's a wise answer, is we're going to do what the people who know. I mean, I don't know anything about medicine or viruses or government. I don't know anything about either of those things. So I'm going to trust the people who do. And we'll find a way to meet. We'll have church, whether it's in this building or not. We'll do our best to do whatever.
It will be interesting what comes of this. And of course, we pray that this will be the upper hand will be gained rather quickly, and in a month it's all done and gone. There's a vaccine and it's under control. Even today, China is seeing a decline in the number of new cases, and so there's some level of turnaround. So don't live in fear. Live by faith, take precautions, pray, and pick up your sword. And so we say, pray, wash your hands, don't touch your face, and we're going to take these precautions.
One thing over the past several months, I think you said this phrase a couple times, and for some reason it's kind of stuck with me, is that we shouldn't give the devil, we shouldn't give Satan too much or too little credit. Like, most of us don't spend a lot of active time thinking about evil. And so I'm curious, like, I'm seeing a lot of people, understandably so, like, freak out about this. Like, they're canceling plans or locking themselves in their basement. They're buying all the toilet paper or whatever. Do you think, like, I'm not saying that like Satan is making this happen. But do you think it's true that when things like this happen, our faith is maybe tested a little bit more, and people maybe what they really believe might kind of be held to the fire a little bit more about how much we trust God or how much we trust in, would you agree that things just, whenever tragedies or weird things like this happen, our faith is tested to some degree?
Yeah, and in a sense, our true colors come out.
Mm-hmm.
On the front end, the most I can say is if my wife and kids are all killed in a tragic accident like Job from the Old Testament, well, not wife, but all of his kids were,
mm-hmm.
the most I can say on the front end of that is, I hope when that happens, I
mm-hmm. say,
the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. May the name of the Lord be praised. But your true colors come out when the tragedy hits.
Right.
It is true that there is a raised awareness of germs
mm-hmm.
when there's this kind of a crisis. And yet, how should we on a day-by-day basis respond to the devil? I think that we give him too much credit if we're always worried about the devil and his demons tempting us, and if we're just consumed with a fear of the devil's power.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, to act like there are no germs is a bad decision. So in my mind, the best scenario is that when it comes to hygiene,
mm-hmm.
medically,
mm-hmm.
and comes to spiritual hygiene, resisting temptation, that come coronavirus or not, we're already living right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I hope that we will take these precautions, but honestly, we should be treating the devil like he's alive and real, and we ought to be aware of it, but not be given into fear of him. And the same way with literal germs. So don't give the devil too much credit and don't give him too little credit.
Yeah, I think that's a good perspective to keep. So one thing I don't think I mentioned at the top, right now we're live, so if you have questions, we'd love to have your questions. We've got a couple comments from Lloyd and Emily, so thanks to those of you who have kind of wrote a couple comments in. Thank you for watching. If you have questions, we'd be glad to try to answer them. So if you're watching live, feel free to type them in here and we'll keep an eye on that. So the timing on this is kind of funny, Brent, because on this past Sunday, you talked about grit. And a couple of the lines you talked about is having courage in the face of challenge and having perseverance in the midst of difficulty. And 4 days ago, we had no idea where we would be today. So it's just kind of crazy timing. But some of this actually goes back to grit and what do you do when life gets complicated. And one of the verses you mentioned, which I thought was relevant for today, is 2 Corinthians 12:10. I take pleasure in weakness, insults, catastrophes, persecution, and pressure because of Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. That's pretty relevant today as we're talking about all this virus stuff. But why don't you give us a quick recap of grit, and how does the grit equation fit into where we are today, and how do we balance grit with taking care of ourselves with health?
So this past Sunday, I highlighted the study of Angela Duckworth, who's I think a brilliant psychologist, writer, thinker, communicator. But she did all this research on grit and what it is, which is basically stick-to-itiveness, stand back up when you get knocked down, perseverance. Why it's so important was a second thing that she put a lot of study into. And the why is it's more important for success than good looks or IQ or talent or opportunity. Like your parents were rich and they sent you to a good school and they had connections and you got a good job. That grit is what brings success far more than IQ or talent or opportunity or anything else. And then how do you get it? The interesting thing is that everything she said about what it is, why it's important, and how to get it, we're already in the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
But yeah, the Bible talks about what she said was growth mindset. And the verse you just read was a growth mindset. Growth mindset says when bad things happen, corona, tragedy, cancer, death, I lose my job. When bad things happen, a growth mindset says, I can grow through this. What's Paul say in Philippians 4? I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Growth mindset, I can become better. What does James 2 say? when you're forged by fire, your perseverance grows, your character grows, your self-control, everything grows. Okay. Yeah. So the growth mindset is just critical, and it's all in the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we come to the coronavirus, and it would just be a good thing if our coworkers and our friends saw confidence and joy, realism. We didn't make fun of people who were more cautious than us. We didn't make fun of people who were less cautious than us, because by personality, we're all somewhere on the cautious scale.
Right.
And with Jesus or without, we have as humans a fear meter that is just kind of part of our personality. And wouldn't it be great if we could display grit? It will look a little different if you're at a high fear on your, you're just always cautious.
Yeah.
That's your personality. But even you can have grit. And of course, when you're less fear, just by personality, you still need grit.
Right.
It would be great if our coworkers could actually see a grit and a joy and a confidence in us, despite the reality that this is a big deal.
Yeah. So that's one of my next questions for you, is how, like, we're trying to answer some of the really practical things about, watching screens and pumps and stuff. So there's that level of what the church can do. But then if we could kind of continue that, what can, like, the capital C, the global church, how can we respond in ways, in situations like this, that are actually helpful to our culture? And like I saw someone on Twitter who said, hey, if you are in my city and you're elderly and you're susceptible and you need some groceries, let me know. I'll go get your groceries for you. But I don't know if everyone can necessarily do that, but it seems like when tragedy strikes, that's kind of it's an opportunity for the church to kind of step up and meet some needs. So have you, maybe not as practical as getting groceries, but what else, just what kind of attitude, or what can we do that will maybe help, get rid of some of the fear and just the craziness that's happening right now?
It's clearly, it's going to be one-on-one. I don't have an impact on the city of Wichita.
Right.
You don't either. All of us holding hands together, we can affect Wichita. But if we just, dive down and realize that my influence is going to be in one-on-one conversations. So there's a phrase I've used. I certainly didn't make it up, but you bend the conversation. We change topics of conversation when we're with. So you start, hey, beautiful weather today. How much rain we get? Yeah. Hey, what do you think of the NBA game last night? And then we bend the conversation all the time. We turn it. Sometimes it's a right turn. It's a completely different subject. Yeah. But your question, I just think that we ought to be looking for ways to bend the conversation toward faith and trust and joy. A lot of times, the best way to bend a conversation is to ask a question. They make a big deal of Jesus asked 172 questions and he answered 7 directly or something, that he regularly helped people come to a conclusion simply by asking questions. And I wonder if the difference we can make can really be led in a lot of ways by talking to a neighbor or even another Christian who you say, man, what if I ask this question? And you ask the question, what is the good balance between faith and taking precautions? And you let them answer. That you can then influence them just by asking questions. But yeah, I think we're left with one-on-one influence in all of this.
So talk more about that. So what one-on-one influence, so we can not make too big or too little of a deal out of it. And otherwise, is it just kind of calmness or kindness, or what else?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that, Matt. In Colossians, it says our conversation should always be seasoned with salt. That when we have a conversation with a neighbor, Christian or not, that they ought to walk away and feel like that conversation tasted good. That if we do want to have influence, our goal is choose our words carefully, read the situation. I will talk differently. If I pick up that someone is really hyper conscious, hyper aware of this, and they're like, on the plane, I saw a lady with a full-on mask and gloves.
Yeah.
And she wore them for 2 hours on the plane.
Yep.
I'll talk to her different than I'll talk to a friend where I know where he's at, and he's at,
Right.
Sensitivity and making sure the conversations taste well.
Mm-hmm.
That when we walk away, they ought to say, hey, that was a good, I don't always agree with Matt, but that was a good conversation.
Mm-hmm. I think it's good for all of us to be aware. So I think it's not helpful if you just there's a lot of people who are just dismissing this, all the coronavirus stuff. So I think it's like you, off the top of your head, spread it off the stats about if you're under 40, you have this percent. So I think people trust you when they know that you know what's happening. So hopefully we're the kind of people and we're the kind of church that we're not going to ignore this. We're going to know what's going on and have hopefully a healthy response. So I think being aware, being kind, and then hopefully we can diffuse some of the fear. I hope, just because fear, like if you turn on the TV or go to any news site, people are just losing their minds.
Well, and it sells commercials too.
Oh, yes.
And there's something in us that wants to know the latest.
Yes.
And we all are both energized and drained by fear.
Yes.
And it does both. Like it does something like the adrenaline, but it also drains us.
Right. But keeping a calm perspective, especially from a Christian worldview of, like you said, the worst thing that happens is we're going to die and go to heaven. That's a little bleak. Maybe we shouldn't say that to everybody.
It's not likely.
Yeah. But having an eternal perspective in the midst of the chaos is probably one that would be a welcome change from what a lot of people are seeing and hearing.
Yeah.
So
perspective is another word. So I just came back from mission board meetings, and you hear stories of true tragedy.
Yeah.
And not in the least am I minimizing the reality that we're in with, the coronavirus. It's big and it's serious.
Yeah.
And people are dying. Yes, a lot more die from regular flu, but the mortality rate from coronavirus is 10 or 20 times higher than the death rate for the regular influenza. And so not for a minute am I minimizing the significance of this.
Right.
But man, I get back from these board meetings with our missionary agency, Multiply, and you're literally talking people thrown in jail for their faith, people beaten for their faith. You're talking life and death, really. Yeah. And that's why at the beginning we said, hey, this whole thing, our first question is faith-based, then is medically based.
Right. Pray and then grab the sword.
Yeah, but we first this.
Yep.
And we need to keep perspective in this thing, in our conversations, in teaching our kids, our kids have to see our faith. Yeah. If all they see is a bottle of Purell hand sanitizer, we have missed the mark on parenting.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Put a Bible right in front of this baby and then give a peek to this, but come back to this. Because that's the most important thing.
Yep. So we didn't give quite as much time as we usually do to your previous sermon. Anything else about grit that you want to re-highlight or high points from your sermon from your perspective?
No one's life will ever be worse by having grit. Grit is win. And so, chase after it, dig deep. Yeah. It's not an easy thing because the devil wants us to give up. He wants us to, but no, listen to the sermon if you haven't. It was a helpful sermon for a lot of people. Yeah,
it's different from what you typically talk about, but I think a lot of people really liked it. People were clapping for you at the end of third service, which that doesn't happen very often. So
and rightly so. Rightly so. Unless I finish early.
Yes, and then you get a rousing round of applause. Yes. Well, so real quick for this upcoming Sunday, we just mentioned we're going to do all this extra stuff to try to be wise about the coronavirus, but we also have a guest speaker. You want to give it just a quick preview of what's happening this
Love
Sunday?
to do that. Bob Davis is going to be here. He's a missionary to Thailand. He's a good friend. He's preached here before. He always does a good job. And the best thing about it, this is Brent's perspective. Last year through Multiply, and we give a lot of money and we support missionaries with our missionary organization called Multiply.
Yeah.
But we had over 6,500 baptisms last year that our offerings helped pull off. Great things are happening.
Yeah.
And it's just great. And so you're going to be inspired and encouraged. And it's not just overseas. We've had close to 70 kids accept the Lord through our after-school Bible clubs. We got a whole group of kids who are students who are going to Costa Rica this Saturday, and pray for them because they're understandably asking the questions about coronavirus. But yeah, great things are happening. God's at work. We're going to get a good picture of that overseas. But notwithstanding, there's a bunch of great stuff happening here in Wichita right now through our church as well. But that's coming up on Sunday. Bob Davis, worth getting out of bed for. Show up.
That'd be really good. Of course, we want you here. Again, we don't know what's going to happen in the next few days. Of course, you can always watch online. We'll still be streaming on Facebook and YouTube. If you can't make it for any reason, or specifically if there are health, who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of days. So that's always an option as well. But we hope that you can join us in the building, and we're doing all I can to be responsible about all the things that are happening. And again, we'll send an email out later this afternoon detailing all of our processes and where we're at with all the health coronavirus stuff. So, okay. So thanks for the comments. I see Brad and Nathan and Jared. We've got a couple comments popping in. So thank you for everybody watching live. We're almost out of time, Brent. What else do we need to make sure we talk about?
We need to highlight, we just live in an increasingly media-driven world. And as a church, we try and walk that line because we don't want people being lazy and just doing the sermon and song in their pajamas because they're too lazy to get out and come to church. On the other hand, we recognize and embrace the potential that this has. And so Matt is doing a great job of just dreaming about creative ways to keep getting the gospel out. And you have, because I had nothing to do with it, move this to a podcast more, whatever. Tell us a bit about that.
So we're live every Thursday right here on Facebook. Soon after, it's available on Facebook, YouTube, and our mobile app if you have the First MB app. And the past few weeks, we've been working on getting this as a podcast. So if you have the Apple Podcast app on your phone or iPad or whatever, we're working on getting all the old episodes so you can get caught up and watch or listen to all 25 of these if you want to go back and listen. So all those are up now. And we're going to keep working on making them a little bit better and doing some post-production stuff. And we're going to eventually be on Spotify and other places. Right now, we're just on Apple. But so if you can't join us live, and if you every once in a while pop in and watch them later on Facebook, if podcasts are more convenient for you driving around or at the gym or whatever, if you want to listen to me and Brent talk for 30 minutes, you can.
That's a good deal.
Check out the podcast. And I was going to mention that before all this blew up, we did talk about coronavirus and fear, and we even talked about politics a little bit last week about what to do if we're scared of the political situation. So if you missed last week, hop on Facebook, YouTube, our app, or on a podcast, and you can check out what we talked about last week. And it's kind of fun to see this thing grow and for us to try new things. So we encourage you to check it out and subscribe and listen to those as well. So, All
right. Well, live with faith, not fear, and live with joy. Be thankful. Our neighbors need to see that we walk through this well. And let's not minimize. If you're a no fear kind of person, don't roll your eyes at those who wear masks and gloves. We don't know their situation. They may have a compromised immune system or whatever. And if you're more the fear, to take precautions, just show grace to those who are a little less fear driven. We need to walk well as Christians and leave a good mark on this world.
This is a good time to show what
we're different.
What Christians can
different.
Look like. So, so do that well this week. Hope to see you on Sunday. We'll continue to keep you posted on coronavirus stuff. If it affects any of our programming, we'll be sure to let you know. So stay tuned to your email and our Facebook, and we'll keep you posted. So thanks for everybody watching today. Go get some hand sanitizer and have a great day. We'll see you next time.